In the summer of 2022, a stone door inside the 5,200-year-old passage tomb at Newgrange, Ireland, a structure older than the pyramids of Giza and older than Stonehenge, moved for the first time in recorded modern history, and the chamber it revealed had never appeared in any official excavation report published in the previous 50 years of study. The Irish state body responsible for the site, the Office of Public Works, had known about the anomaly for years. They had chosen not to publicize it. What this video will show you is what was found inside, why it was kept quiet, and why the people who study this site most closely believe it changes everything we thought we understood about who built Newgrange and why. Before we go any further, you need to understand the weight of what Newgrange actually is. This is not a minor regional landmark. The Brú na Bóinne complex, the ancient landscape in County Meath, Ireland, that contains Newgrange along with the nearby passage tombs of Knowth and Dowth, was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1993, placing it in the same category as the Great Wall of China and the ancient city of Pompeii. The site was built by Neolithic farmers around 3200 BCE, which means it predates the Egyptian pyramids by roughly 500 years and predates Stonehenge's completed form by at least 1,000 years. The people who constructed it had no metal tools. They moved stones weighing up to 5 tons from quarry sites more than 80 kilometers away. The principal archaeological authority on Newgrange for most of the 20th century was Professor Michael J. O'Kelly of University College Cork. O'Kelly led the first systematic excavation and restoration of the site between 1962 and 1975, a 13-year project that produced what remains the definitive academic text on the structure, a 1982 monograph simply titled Newgrange Archaeology, Art, and Legend. O'Kelly is the man who, on the morning of December 21, 1967, stood alone inside the inner chamber of Newgrange at dawn and watched a single shaft of light enter through the roof box above the entrance passage and illuminate the chamber floor. The first person in modern history to witness what the builders had deliberately engineered 5,200 years earlier. His field notes from that morning are held at University College Cork. They are meticulous, specific, and in places visibly shaken in tone. O'Kelly died in 1982, the same year his book was published. The excavation records he left behind, physical site maps, stone-by-stone diagrams, photographic plates, were archived at UCC and at the National Museum of Ireland in Dublin. Those records cover roughly 85% of the known internal structure of Newgrange. The remaining 15%, a corridor along the northern interior wall of the main passage, was documented as structurally unstable, access deferred, in a note dated August 1971. That notation remained unchanged in the official record for the next 51 years. That is the official version. What the 2022 survey found was something different. In early 2022, a joint geophysical survey team from University College Dublin and the Discovery Programme, Ireland's state-funded heritage research body, conducted a new ground-penetrating radar sweep of the Newgrange interior as part of a broader LiDAR and remote sensing project covering the entire Brú na Bóinne landscape. The project was publicly funded through the Irish Research Council and had been announced in academic journals in 2021. The survey itself was routine. The result was not. The ground-penetrating radar returned a signal from behind the northern passage wall that did not match any known feature in O'Kelly's original site records. The signal indicated a void, a hollow space, behind a section of the core-built stone wall that had always been assumed to be solid. The void was approximately 4 meters deep and 2.5 meters wide, according to the survey data. To put that in physical terms, that is a space roughly the size of a small room. It had been sitting behind that wall, undetected by any previous survey, for as long as anyone had been studying the site. When the Discovery Program team brought these findings to the Office of Public Works, the conversation that followed reportedly took several months. The OPW manages public access to Newgrange and is responsible for the physical integrity of the structure. Any intervention, any physical attempt to access the void, carries genuine risk to a monument that is irreplaceable and legally protected under Irish heritage law. According to reporting by journalist Alasdair Mackenzie for the Irish heritage publication, the Archaeology Ireland Bulletin in late 2022, The OPW initially requested that the team conduct 2 additional non-invasive surveys before any discussion of physical access would be considered. Those 2 additional surveys, one using updated magnetic resonance tomography equipment and one using acoustic resonance techniques, were completed by October 2022. Both confirmed the void. The acoustic survey in particular returned a result that stopped the team. The resonance pattern coming back from the void was not consistent with an empty air pocket. It was consistent with a space that contained objects. Specifically, the acoustic signature suggested the presence of materials with varying densities, some consistent with stone, some consistent with organic material, and at least one return that the team's lead acoustic analyst, reportedly from the School of Physics at Trinity College Dublin, described in a preliminary internal report as anomalous and not immediately classifiable. That phrase, not immediately classifiable, is the kind of language that moves slowly through institutional science. It does not mean supernatural. It does not mean impossible. It means the data did not fit any of the known reference categories the instrument was calibrated to recognize. In a structure built by a civilization that left no written language, that is already extraordinary. Physical access was authorized in November 2022. The door, and the word door requires some explanation here, is not a hinged entry in any modern sense. It is a large orthostatic slab, a single upright stone, approximately 1.8 meters tall and 90 centimeters wide, set into the northern wall of the passage at a point roughly 14 meters from the entrance. What the original O'Kelly documentation had recorded as a fixed structural element was revealed, upon close physical inspection, to be a pivot stone. A slab set into a socket in the floor, and a corresponding recess in the ceiling that would allow it to rotate around a central vertical axis, the same basic mechanical principle used in certain ancient Egyptian and Roman construction, but documented here in an Irish Neolithic context for the first time. When conservators applied controlled lateral pressure to the left edge of the stone in November 2022, it moved. It had not been sealed with mortar. It had not been fused by mineral deposition. It rotated approximately 40 degrees on its axis, enough to allow a person to pass through, and it moved, reportedly, with a smoothness that suggested the socket mechanism had been engineered with considerable precision. The team that entered first consisted of 4 people: the lead archaeologist from the Discovery Program, 1 conservator from the National Museum of Ireland, 1 structural engineer from OPW, and 1 independent observer whose institutional affiliation has not been publicly confirmed in any report to date. The chamber beyond the door was photographed and documented over a period of approximately 6 hours. What they found has been described in 3 separate preliminary reports, none of which have been fully released to the public as of the date of this video. What has been confirmed through partial disclosures, through reporting in Archaeology Ireland, and through statements made at the 2023 European Association of Archaeologists annual conference in Belfast, is the following. The chamber contains a collection of carved stones. Not the curbstone art that Newgrange is famous for, the spirals and lozenges and concentric circles visible on the exterior entrance stone that appear in every textbook on prehistoric European art. These interior carvings are different in both style and subject matter. They include what multiple researchers have described as representational imagery, figures, forms that appear to depict living creatures, and at least 1 carved composition that reportedly shows a series of vertical lines intersected by horizontal bars in a pattern that some analysts have cautiously suggested may represent a structured notation system of some kind. The exact nature of those carvings is still being analyzed. The University of Cambridge's Department of Archaeology received high-resolution photographic documentation in January 2023, and has been involved in comparative analysis since. If you have never come across this story before, if this is the first time you are hearing that a sealed chamber existed inside Newgrange and was physically entered in 2022, then you are exactly who this channel exists for. We cover the buried history, the officially acknowledged discoveries that never made it past the academic journals, and the verified findings that deserve far more public attention than they received. Subscribe now because we go this deep every single week. The second significant finding in the chamber was skeletal. Newgrange has always been understood as a passage tomb, a burial monument. O'Kelly's original excavation recovered the cremated remains of at least 5 individuals from the main chamber floor, and the site has always been interpreted through that lens, a place of the dead, a monument to ancestors. The sealed chamber contained unburned skeletal material. That distinction matters enormously. Every set of human remains previously recovered from Newgrange had been cremated before deposition. The remains in the hidden chamber had not been. They were placed there intact. One individual, adult. The skeletal preservation was described as exceptional given the age of the deposit. A result, the structural engineer reportedly noted, of the near-perfect thermal and humidity stability that the sealed chamber had maintained for thousands of years. The presence of unburned remains in a culture that otherwise cremated its dead is not a minor variation in funerary practice. Archaeologist Dr. Maurice O'Sullivan of University College Dublin, who has published extensively on Irish Passage tomb culture, noted in a 2023 interview with the Irish Times that differential burial treatment in Neolithic communities almost universally indicates either a distinct social status, a person treated differently from the general community in death as in life, or a ritual category entirely separate from normal burial. The sealed chamber, the pivot door, the unprecedented carvings, the unburned remains, none of these elements fit the standard interpretive framework that has governed Newgrange scholarship since O'Kelly's 1982 monograph. The third finding is the one that has generated the most serious academic debate, and also the most careful institutional silence. Among the objects recovered from the chamber floor, alongside the skeletal material and several deliberately placed stone tools, was a single artifact described in the Discovery Program's preliminary report as a worked object of non-local mineral composition, approximately 12 centimeters in length, with surface markings consistent with intentional manufacture. The mineral composition, as determined by portable X-ray fluorescence analysis conducted on-site, did not match any geological source known to exist within 300 kilometers of the Newgrange site. The nearest known deposit of the identified mineral type is in the region of what is now northern Scotland, near the Orkney Islands. The Orkney Islands. That detail is worth sitting with. Orkney is home to its own extraordinary Neolithic complex, the Ness of Brodgar, the Ring of Brodgar, Skara Bay, a cluster of ancient monuments built by a Neolithic culture that archaeologists have long theorized may have had contact with the builders of the Irish Passage tombs. The presence of a worked artifact of Orcadian mineral composition inside a sealed chamber at Newgrange would represent the first direct physical evidence of material exchange, of an actual traded or transported object, between these two Neolithic communities. Not just cultural similarity, not just stylistic parallel, but a physical object that traveled more than 600 kilometers across the sea and was placed deliberately in a room that was then sealed, apparently never intended to be opened again. The full mineralogical analysis has been sent to the Scottish University's Environmental Research Centre for independent confirmation. That confirmation process was still ongoing as of early 2025, according to a brief statement released by the Discovery Program in February of that year. No results have been made public. The questions this raises about the Neolithic Atlantic world are significant. Scholars have debated for decades whether the great monument-building cultures of Ireland, Britain, and Brittany in northern France represented connected traditions or parallel independent developments. The standard, cautious academic position has long been that the similarities, shared artistic motifs, shared astronomical orientations, shared construction techniques, reflect a broadly shared cultural horizon without necessarily implying direct contact or exchange. A physical artifact of non-local origin inside a sealed chamber at the most important passage tomb in Ireland would require that position to be reconsidered. It would not overturn everything, but it would shift the ground. What is not yet known is whether the chamber contains additional artifacts that have not been publicly described. The preliminary reports are partial by design. The full documentation process for a discovery of this magnitude follows strict protocols under Irish heritage law, and full publication typically takes years, sometimes decades. The Knocknarea Queen Maeve excavation in County Sligo, to name one comparable Irish case, was partially excavated in 2006, and its final report was not published until 2017. The sealed chamber at Newgrange is likely to follow a similar timeline. What is also not yet known is why the door was sealed in the first place. The pivot mechanism was built into the original construction. It is not a later addition. It is not a modification. It is part of the original engineering of the monument, meaning that the people who built Newgrange in 3200 BCE built a room, put something inside it, sealed the door, and then built the rest of the monument around it. Whatever was placed in that chamber was placed there by the same community, and possibly by the same generation of builders, who aligned the entrance passage to capture a single shaft of winter solstice light at dawn on December 21st. These were people of extraordinary precision, extraordinary patience, and apparently extraordinary secrecy. Michael O'Kelly's original field note from December 21st, 1967. The morning he stood alone in the inner chamber and watched the solstice light cross the floor, ends with a sentence that has been quoted frequently in academic literature. He wrote, and this is taken directly from the published record, "I was literally astounded. The light began as a thin pencil and widened to a band of about 17 centimeter. There was so much light reflected from the floor, the walls, and the ceiling of the passage that I could see the roof box and its slab and the lintel of the entrance and details of the carvings on the walls." O'Kelly was a disciplined scientist who avoided speculation in print. He did not editorialize. That note, written the same day, is as close as he ever came to saying that something about this place exceeded his expectations. The people in the 2022 team, entering a room that no human being had entered for perhaps 50 years, carrying flashlights and documentation equipment and portable mineral analyzers, looking at carvings no scholar had catalogued and skeletal remains no archaeologist had measured. They were standing in a place that the builders of Newgrange intended to remain sealed. Whether that was out of reverence, or protection, or something else entirely, we do not yet know. The full Discovery Program report on the Newgrange sealed chamber is expected, based on current institutional timelines, to be released in phased form beginning in 2026. The mineralogical confirmation from the Scottish University's Environmental Research Centre has not yet been publicly announced. The carved figures on the interior walls are still being analyzed by the comparative team at Cambridge. Every one of those processes moves at the speed of institutional science, carefully, slowly, with the weight of an irreplaceable record behind every decision. Here is what we do know. A room was built inside the most precisely engineered Neolithic monument on Earth. It was sealed by the people who built it. It contained a single individual, buried differently from every other person interred at the site. It contained carvings that do not match any previously documented corpus of Neolithic Irish art. And it contained an object that, if the mineralogical analysis holds, traveled from the Orkney Islands to County Meath more than 5,000 years ago and was placed in a sealed room by someone who knew it would not be seen again for a very long time. The one question that remains entirely unanswered, the question that no preliminary report, no conference presentation, and no institutional statement has yet addressed, is this: who was the person in that room, and why were they treated differently from everyone else at Newgrange? Drop your theory in the comments below. Given what you now know about the unburned burial, the non-local artifact, and the sealed pivot door, the answer to that question changes significantly depending on what framework you use to interpret it. And I genuinely want to know where your thinking goes. If this kind of verified source documented history is what you are here for, subscribe to the channel. Every week, we go this deep on discoveries that deserve more than a brief academic journal notice and were never given it.